I am going to be talking about not only feminine egos, but, feminine ego is a loaded terminology to start with. I personally have a reasonable amount of duality in my soul. I feel like that had been in part for being raised by both genders in two individual households. And over recent reflection, I've been able to hold on in a way that is more more affectionate for every realm, stage, um, organism that I've been able to observe, be a part in. Realistically, if you are observing, you're not a part of, you're only a a mechanism too at that point. Um, CoachKajan um, had, I just said Chai, had spoken of the idea where somebody is holding a value for his blessing, and people, again, this was mentioned specifically that of the Western world, people are requesting for a long life that is healthy and prosperous with these things. And his response to such a request is always, would you want an easy life, or to be molded into a better person that can create a better life from a worse life in some language. And in that, I agree, definitely, for starters. I think that we as people are looking for something to chase, and a lot of our generation lately has been disheartened or been given real examples to either follow in the steps of or really feed off of in whatever positive mutualistic fashion that it can be. I do personally, I have personally seen in different ways how generations speak to younger um, ones. I was thinking of something else. And how it is mutually beneficial, or how it can be freeing for people to have a space that they maybe wouldn't have had, or almost where each person is equipped to complete a complexion of this conversation that hadn't been brought to the foresight of somebody's interest even. And that is the path of life. We're looking for what interests us, yet being distracted by what we desire. And that takes me into relationships, or starts me off with relationships, and how between egos, actually, ego, I want to start by mentioning ego is the understanding of a person's self concept, complexion, necessity to impact. And to be a person of necessity to others, you should understand your impact. So to some extent, celebrities, which they should not be people that people will amount to, they're just people that have done things successfully. um, that sounds very pessimistic. That's not what I mean. They shouldn't be people to model your life after. They've just done things successfully. They are people that you can learn from. It's just there's not one way to do things correctly. There's just prosperous ways and then less prosperous ways. And moving to the idea of ego, I want to reference Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday, where in that time I was met with a variety of different perceptions that had been made of me in a space where we had cultivated a very nurturing yet free environment, and specifically for my gender, where we were working out with what started as 2 ended up being like 5 and then 15. Like then you have like a whole gym, and then it was like a party, and it was a great time. And in egos and relationships, your understanding for necessity is a baseline. So in that, I propose that the relationships created at formative years, stages in a being are a path that can be rewritten, but are more often better understood through grief in a degree that other people have had less time or reasonability to view their pride in such a way. Yeah, okay. That was a lot. uh so in that, everybody does have biases, and I did mention a light introduction about egos and metaphor of planetary systems being a person's body versus their ego through modes of mass for translation to emotional weights, and baseline. So the reference or thought that had been taking my mindscape while that expression was being given was of emotional relationships with pets in adolescence. When I was in college, the book that we had read was written by the professor giving the class, and one of the books that was referenced but not always assigned, I think it was actually assigned as optional reading, which I did respect. Um, Rest in peace to Miss Cheri Ross. And she was very open and receptive or responsive. Even if it was like, it seemed like it was never less than 3 sentences. And I think that was a standard that was either put by the psychological community or her specific research group. So in that, I would start by talking about, she did talk about ego in that class as well. And one aspect of ego is finding a point of no return. A friend of mine who will be shown in later videos when I create an RSS link, and I will post them on YouTube as well. Um, he had a near-death experience and spoke of that to be a point where he references a before and after in thought, escape, or assimilation in principle. So having one of those moments is important to reference and remember, yet trauma does not always allow for those principles to, yeah, to take place. Excuse me. And okay, um, yes, trauma is real. It's like, if we're going into metaphors, trauma is the scaffolding of a building that has yet to be completed, and somebody has removed joists, essential joists. So, in the aspect of ego and planetary systems, when I was explaining it to a friend of mine, shout out my Surge. Oh my God, uh, we look to an object or a mass as a value system based on based on expectability. That's what creates our table periodically. And in that, if there's an irregularity, like a certain object creating, emitting, hurtling, acting in a aversion to gravity, there's potential for concern. So, as a psychotherapeutic interest or practitioner, the person who has a smaller the person who is in a mass that is the person who carries a mass that is, let's say, dense. So they're a small planet that creates much gravity. So when we were speaking about mass, many people assume mass as irreparability or immobility, when in reality, it is attraction, or it is contraction, I guess, to some extent, based on its positioning. And when we look at a person's ego, we understand that their emotions in said ego are variable. And when emotions are too variable, it is expected. And expectation is comforting, especially to the opposite gender. Um, Expectability and smaller variability in emotion is generally seen as more stable, and through various societal, I was going to say cultural, but I do believe societal, now that it's gone more mainstream, societal approaches to lack of sympathy, which then creates apathy. We are now striving. We are now striving for empathy as a replacement, when empathy is, again, Cheri Ross, shut up, is the ability to have a mindscape that matches the one that is currently being expressed. And a mind can go so far with the truth and understanding that its meditation is only as physical to the reality that it practices. Again, ooh, yes. And so I would say as as an understanding of ego in principle, there is a paradox that occurs between men and women, and that can change societally, yet will always be independent culturally. So, in a household, the ideal of a provider or a an absolute figure is always going to be necessary. Some people, they cling to religion as a point to create solidarity in a household, or in a persona, in a united front. Um, so there's no issue in having something to stand for, or openly carrying biases, whatever. Um, in relationships, and calling to my ego person. Oh, I didn't press timer. Dang. Calling to my ego personally, I would say there's been a lot of stressors that have sparked from the feminine ego that had always, I did actually do them in order, by age, had always kind of given me pushback, that then almost kind of made me want to just look for something else. As a young man, from other influential men, I've like varying influential men under the archetypal structure, from the protector to the facilitator. Um, the the men all say women are really what you make of them, and then women, I personally see women generally want a man that is out of the box, cookie cutter, whereas men are interested in understanding how a woman does or can develop, change, be influenced. And in principle, that in principle, that relationship is dangerous. There's a movie with Adam Driver in it, where his wife is consumed with a a foreign drug that had, it was a concentrate, pill concentrate, and it's a really trippy movie. I should probably link it. In differing aspects of relationship, men are not looking to cheat, but not always 2 feet in the door. And I think that's a protective instinct, just because. So if we're gonna speak about the whole if we're gonna speak about the dynamics that occur in a relationship, and how some feel like positions on to for the other can be demeaning. I think that it's important to accept the reality that love is degrading. Like that's like the fact. Like when you love something, you're okay with looking foolish for it. And that's the basis of comedy. It's the basis of acting. It's being vulnerable enough to do so. And from that, I think that women going into a relationship of intimacy are worried, or I've seen are worried about how much they're going to expose, whereas a man is looking for somebody to expose things that haven't necessarily been frequent, allotted, given a space to free flow. So some of the biases that I've had were one, given my being my first physical relationship, saying you're probably gonna cheat, and that had been a constant theme of of oddity that I had seen, where she had been texting more more people of the other gender, and I had only been around other people of said gender. Um, but apparently she had like heard things or said she had people watching, and that's another thing that actually women do joke, say, feel a need to have like watchers. And actually that feel part was more allotted to how women feel a need to want to feel a need to be wanted, and there's nothing wrong with that. I respect that. I think everybody should be wanted, cared for, um, given the reality and the validity of their own personnel to be learned and surprised, and like just really every whatever your your cup of tea is. And so the other one in a relationship was in high school or after leaving high school. This was the transitional from high school to college. She had said, "We can't all be as good as you," and I didn't even feel too great in my own right at that time. I was actually kind of stepping into my own. So that was, you know, dawning, surprising, especially because we had like such a good time physically a lot of the time. And like anything that I would do well then became self negating, because like you do something well physically, then it's like the questions always to any gender or to either persona, it's always, why was that so advanced, or do you like me, or do you do that to everybody? And I've been in both sides of it. It's an interesting interplay that occurs when prompted. So I wanted to refocus a little bit and visit the differences in necessity, or I guess placeholders of either gender, and how, oh my god, I guess, should I not say gender, of how either role, how either archetype takes place. And I think that as people, there are biases and ego that are at play at all times, yet all are going to be in variability to another. So that's why taking on perspective is valuable. And the argument has always been to go to college for perspective, and yet I believe finding perspective is always closer than you make it out to be. It's just how much do you value people, and how much attention and time of day is any one person given. So in regard to ego, a person's intrinsic view is extremely important. And from moving, I'm sorry, set timer. From moving away in the idea of body image, you attract more to yourself by being authentic. And then you want to find, in my opinion, what is not you, but most similar to what you value. So, for example, I'm a person that's fairly endearing and it doesn't serve me. So, in a relationship, I know that the ego I want to attract is not even masculine, but just interested in getting their way. And I think I could learn from somebody who's more about being shameless to get something. Um, so in image, so overall, so not internal, but like complexion. A person has two facets of ego where it's their belief, and that is not exactly attributed to a moral compass, but can be associated to one in the way that it's driving morale. Whereas if you're, wait, where was I going with that? If you're motivated by what is your self image, that isn't any better or worse of a motivating factor. Um, I do think that it's a different aspect of ego, and ego is always going to be what is left over. So, an impression, a result, a body of work, or a what's that word? What's that word? A rendition. Um, so, in terms of men and women, this is more free spoken, so I'm not gonna lie. I see the male aspect of ego to be tested openly in society more than women, yet women are tried for it more. And I think that can create, or has created, an overcorrection of sorts to limit a lot of control in different forms. I think that as a as a cultural attempt, there's been a lot of negation of certain masculine archetypes that are empowering, whereas femininity in masculinity has been celebrated more. So, what does that have to do with ego? Um, I would argue it's a comfort zone dilemma, um, or principle where you don't have to push out of a comfort zone to grow. Yet, when you step out of a comfort zone, the perspective may alter what you believe intrinsically. So there's a person's core beliefs, a person's repeated actions, and then a person's world value or something like that. So like what you'd expect from the world, what you do on a personal level, and then what you believe that you need to sustain the other two levels of for functionality. Yeah, this isn't a video to speak poorly about any one gender. I think I'm just speaking about ego as a whole and how it, for most people, it seems to change throughout a lifetime, whereas for myself, it seems to have only awoken more. Um, I say that meaning that like some people had a lot more ego at a younger age, and I don't believe that I did as much. Um, Goodwill Hunting, you know, there's there's an aspect of having consistency in your traits to feel safe in self. So if a person has regular inconsistencies with consistent people, that can be enough of an in group to make the world feel like a, a universal way. I think that as humans, we forget how valuable an ego is, and then we also despise what is irregular. All right, I'm having extreme technical difficulties, so this must be good. Closing arguments, or sorry, not argument. This isn't an argument. In closing thoughts, I would like to regard the fact that we as humans have a lot more in common than we do differences. It's just more about comfort and, again, scenario where somebody would want to express a certain trait, characteristic, action, however it may be. There's a relationship between form and function, in that being meditative action is a form of tithing that I have yet to master, yet had seemed to always be in work or motion. The ego is, I feel like I've already stated this, a understanding of self, but also a appreciation for what is an expected reality or confirmation from outside sources. So confirmation from outside sources can alter what somebody believes, and that is an essential part of growth. So there's I'm having vague memories of, I didn't start my timer. Of course I didn't. Of course I didn't. I'm having vague memories of a time where the confirmation, or the explanation of where the confirmation of two spaces then allows for a different firing in the brain, where it's almost like a remapping of something. So like when you sing a note for the first time, or grab a vocal tone, and you can hold on to that as a memory or as a moment to recall, as a feeling that is irreparable. Those are human existences that carry with the ego. And as humans, my hope would then be that we find a reason to utilize our ego, and then finding as a collective there are more reasons to seek out having an ego and holding on to a belief. I see creators that are mostly women giving very egoless, heart driven content that is impressive and adjacent to that, to thoughts of my own. That you don't need a lot to catch attention, to be impactful, to have renown, to people you potentially resented or had those emotions inflicted. So in having control, the best outcome is always going to be the largest distance traveled. And that's the argument for college again as well. Or anything that is of delayed gratification. So building a business, building a physique, building a formula, having the freedom to express is a cage in itself. When a mind is open without border, there is often less initiation and more ingenuity. Ingenuity is not initiation. Ingenuity is it's a lapse of thought that has been done millions of times. The scientific method is not disingenuous, and it's standardized for a reason. When intelligent people find themselves, it is the beginning or the end, or sorry, the rise or the downfall of their expertise. I don't remember who said it, but somebody had said the smartest people, or I think it's a pretty frequent saying, where the smartest people are often in the lowliest places or underserved, based in their own overcommitment to something that is irrelevant at the end of the day. Again, Machiavellianism. Um, I have been doing my best to align culturally in different ways, yet I have also understood with that we need to shape a culture worth existing for, or shaping, or no, shape a culture worth contributing to, that we exist for. And in an ego driven state, I would like to share more of myself and how when I was younger, I had the idea more where I would want or think a relationship and a marriage was probable. Yet, the age that I've gotten to as a man has shown me that it doesn't always feel as good as it seems and doing is always enjoyable. Um, so trying doesn't always have the same fire, doesn't always light the same spark. And in addition to harnessing an ideal or being um, encapsulated by something and giving yourself something holy, or giving yourself wholly to something, um, I see a lot of different religions and people that hold interest. And I think that in holding interest, the only thing that makes interest reasonable is attempt. And when attempted, you're doing. And an attempt is not trying. An attempt is accepting what is done. Um, so the saying that I got from said was, in order to have, you must do, and in order to hate, you must have done. So seeing something through to the end is valuable in a lot of senses. I'm a person that has generally pulled the rug out in a lot of ways from plans, and I think that's more for the fact that if my heart's not in it, I'm not going to do it. And that's not a reasonable explanation for acting or not. Yet there's an energy or a strength that I have where, when spoken for, it's easier to contribute. But I'm not gonna die on a hill and make people respect me or want me or any of those things, just for the reason being I don't for the reason being I don't need anybody more than myself, and I've only just learned how to start being good to myself. um Roy Lee, I think, had said that men don't need therapy. We need affirmation, or we need men don't need therapy. We need affirmation. And I agree with that, actually, in a lot of ways, that therapy is only a guardrail. You really shouldn't be trying to practice on without supervision. You have a lot going on in your mind, and it is better to share. Yet, therapy seems to be the only place where people have enough peace of mind to share. So, my closing thoughts hold that we could be together more, but not even that, more like we could figure out where people are lacking. I think there was a defensive end that had recently reached it from the Cowboys, had reached a height or pinnacle that then was met with tragedy in his own regard of him taking his own life. for reasons that are not understood. Um, so between the masculine and feminine ego, I do also think that in actions of self-harm, men do them more in silence, and women have the opportunity of shame a lot more than men do. So that is a contributing factor in a lot of structures and establishments that will continue in stasis. At this moment in time, there are limitations being placed in the Nevada Athletic Commission about where income and how income is allocated. Um, Kaja Jackson or Rasian Cajun made a video about it where he explains a lot better, but it really has to do with fight purses and the Ali Act. So in my abstinence for for money or for like chasing income, I I value that this is larger than just my future, and I know that even like temples and such, this is an ad plug. Yes, I'm gonna be honest right now. This is an ad plug. Temples from churches to mosques all work on an income, and I have a link to Buddha Stones, which is a Nepal and Tibet based company where the owner is sourcing pieces from temples. So that's pretty cool. I get, I believe, $8 for code use on $30 or spend or more, and any use of that would be appreciated. Uh, yeah, we have more to discuss on egos, but I don't really want to get as much into gender based on the reality that archetypes are figures regardless. And like in a form of coaching, coaching is a form of direction, direction is a form of masculinity. So that alone would be a reason to have traits or respects held highly to a person of the opposite sex that just holds a like okay, so there's a again, Buddhism is about observing the images casted on your foresight. So in that, one of the things that I had seen was a certain feeling or a certain agitation that would occur in seeing something somebody else would have or a certain energy that somebody else would carry. I didn't always understand it, but as I got older, I would start to piece this together or feel the projection of so. When it would begin, I'd have a little bit of timid nature when I could have been more generous to the attempt of an abolishment to an idea. There's been different coworkers that I've had or people that express differences and I only ever look for similarities, and by looking at the world that way it is limiting. So I say this to remind that the external world is only as effective as you understand it to be, and people can tell you anything. There's not a limitation or a rule book or an allowance given to what is okay. And I lost my notebook and I didn't start my timer. I really hope we're still going. Other than biological advantage and manipulation, um, either women know too much the effect they have on men, or they don't know enough, and that is also related to ego reality of development. Um, how okay, last for real now. Uh, so biological development and discrepancies in social classes. Women understand social classes before men, and then men are in revision of them, yet never have control. So, because they're always behind, they're always playing catch up, and because of that, women create the faculties that are then norms a um, of a functional organism. So, I guess I say that to say good luck. um, Men and women both peak and fall from interest or necessity of relationship at different times, and that should be of value when choosing a partner. Um, Pastor Michael Todd has spoken about placement, purpose, and person. I think he also added provision in that in a later speech or a sermon. And placement is not always physically in a place, but more like emotionally or socially or within your own track. Because again, emotion and emotion and its variability are facet or faces of an ego that make a persona, and a persona is variable to change. Yet a persona is outside an ego, and an ego holds core beliefs. When finding your placement and being comfortable in your space, a person can change that, but generally shouldn't. Changes when elected is prosperous, and when forced can be blinding. So, placement person, wait, oh, provision. Provision is the actually it's a interesting turn where it's the provision to walk in fire. So before finding person, you're understanding that the steps taken are ones that can hurt you. Where a relationship begins, a connection has the potential to dwindle. So having a person is putting faith in a person, and when a person can't put faith in you, there's less interest. So I guess I say I don't know if my generation has as much skill in putting faith where it's unseen, I I don't mean that in the way of religion specifically. It could be 401ks, it could be spending local, which generally seems to be a generation. I think that's wait, what's it called? I was gonna say Generation Z, but I think it's millennial. I think millennials are a little bit better about shopping local. Um, Gen X and like Alpha don't always see the value, and I get it. Like convenience is convenience, and $1 doesn't seem like a lot, yet like it's just there's always a reason for why something is being marketed, accomplished, fulfilled. Um, so um again, tying back to biases, some I cut on my last um, quotes that I had heard, quotes that I had heard of women saying them to me, but I don't remember this one actually happening. Don't make me, which I think was in relation again to like texting people. Um, Technology has made replacement of individuals easier, and yet the barrier of remission or revival of old actions um, is a lot higher. There's people that just don't want to reduce the amount that they've put in. So by putting in more time, I think that's like a business term. I don't remember what it was. I took intro one time, and it was one of the ones that I really liked, or like the terms that I really liked, where if the startup cost is let's say an X amount, and then the investment cost is over 50% of X, if the investor is willing to spend over 50% on the first stipend, then their potential to spend equal or double goes up by like some significant percent. So it puts them into a archetypal category of differences in outcome, where it could be fear, it could be lack of reaction or response to affect what is in control or controllable. Um, yeah, I've kind of lost my train of thought, but mainly going back to AI and such. Um, there's a reason for anything to be sold to you. I'd hope that you don't buy what they're selling, especially in like terms of packaging or how something is labeled and shipped. It's not always it's not always as advertised. Advertisement has never needed to be honest. It just has been expected to be. And it's kind of like people. So, yeah, good luck.